Okay, very good. So we finished up last week with the story of Yochanan ben Masya, if you remember, where his son went to hire a worker, and then the whole story about whether or not the son had sort of the right of the rishus to offer mizonos, and we went back and forth. And this is in the subject of whether or not if you retract your words, you're not a Baal Maimin. You're not considered to be a credible person or a person who, in some cases, maybe he's impostulatus. We don't know, but in other words, you've got to stay by your word. So if you say something and it turns out you don't mean it or you retract, those are big issues. So that's the subject matter of what we're talking about, whether or not there is considered to be someone is trustworthy if he recants on his words. That's the Inyan. And we saw last week, the Gemara went back and forth on this story with the Rabbi Yochanan ben Masya, but was able to, tune into the fine points that since he was a cotton, he didn't have the right really to speak for his father. So therefore, the Gemara says that if they retract before the work begins, then no harm, no foul, because he's a cotton, and it was never the father who gave the rishus to say that we're going to give you mizonos. Remember, mizonos of Shlomo HaMelech, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. But the Gemara says if you do it after you begin work, then we assume that the son has spoken to the father, and the father has said, okay. In other words, he didn't override him, so to speak. Therefore, when the work starts, you can already rely on the fact that it was the father who was giving voice to that view that you get mizonos, and therefore it's more serious, obviously, if you retract, because there you've already, because the Gemara wanted to bring a raya. It's no raya from there that if you retract, but it is a raya once work starts, because then if you retract, you're retracting on something that you've given your rishus, your imprimatur. So okay, so that's how the Gemara sort of ends on Rav. Now the Gemara going today, we want to delve into Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says that for the most part, that if you renege, then it is considered a mark on your trust, being trustworthy. So now the Gemara is going to dig into that a little further. So we're up to about the middle of the page.
Mem Tes Amud Aleph, correct?
Mem Tes Amud Aleph, yeah. So the Gemara is going to want to ask a question now. Does Rabbi Yochanan really mean what he says when he says that if you recant, then you become untrustworthy? In other words, you're going to bring rayas from other places, but that's the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. So there we are about the middle of the wide lines. Rabbi Yochanan, does Rabbi Yochanan really say? In other words, we've said that Rob says you don't lose your trustworthiness. Rabbi Yochanan says you do. Frek the Gemara, does really Rabbi Yochanan say that you do? Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, what does he say? If someone says to his friend, Matona ani noisen lecha, I'm giving you a gift. In other words, he announces beforehand, I want to give you a gift. Says Rabbi Yochanan there, Yochel lachzabay. He's allowed to retract. He's allowed to recant. So it's pretty straightforward. If he's allowed to recant, what is Rabbi Yochanan, the man, the Omer, who says that when you make a commitment, you say something. No shvuah. There isn't even a shvuah here. You just make a statement. Then you should abide by your statement. You should be sort of stand up. Here, beferish, it says, so what does it mean? So now the Gemara is going to harp in on the words. It says yochel. What does yochel mean? Pshita. When you say yochel, he can retract. Pshita, of course he can retract, right? Until he doesn't give him the matana, he's yochel. He's able to retract. And the Gemara is not asking the kasha on the word yochel. You're telling me yochel achzavoy. What kind of point is that? As long as he didn't give the gift, he's physically able to do it. You remember when you were young and you asked the teacher, can I do this or may I do this? And the teacher said, you may, can you, may you? In other words, the word can you and may you became very, very confusing to us young kids because we didn't know what to ask. Can I do it? May I do it? What should I say? So the Gemara is saying, you're telling me Yachalach Zaboy. What's that Yachalach Zaboy? Of course he's Yachal, he's able. Says the Gemara, Ela Mutter Lach Zaboy. The correct word is that he's mutter, that he's permitted. Not that he can, but he's permitted. So if he's permitted, then that's a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan's over his main view that a person should not recant his words when he says and makes a commitment on something. So if it's mutter, then what's pshat, right? It looks like it's a stira. It's a stira in Rabbi Yochanan. Omer Rav Papa. So Rav Papa comes with a interesting approach. Says Rav Papa, Moidi Rabbi Yochanan b'matana mu'etes to samchadata. Now we're going to sort of, well, maybe split hairs, but we're going to break it down, and we're going to say the following: if you make a commitment, and we call it matana zuta, meaning a small gift. A small gift. If I say to you, I'm going to give you a pack of gum, or I'm going to give you a small matana, nothing ostentatious, nothing. It's much more reliable than I come to you and I say, Michael, I'm going to give you a car. And you say, sure, right? You're skeptical that I'm about to give you a car. But if I give you something that is within reason, that you say, okay, I mean, it's not out, maybe I can give you a car, right? But giving someone a car, giving something that is so large, a person doesn't rely on the gift giver's statement, because in all likelihood it's not emes, or it's exaggeration. We exaggerate. Oh, okay, I'll give you a car. Okay, but so comes Rav Papa and he says, you know why it's not a stira? Because Rabbi Yochanan says b'matana mu'etes to samchadata that you don't retract, right? But in a case where it is a matana, not a mu'etes, but it's a zuta, it's a big matana, then there's no inyan, because he never believed him in the first place. So that's how Rav Papa wants to answer the stira and explain that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't always mean that you shouldn't recant, and if you do, you're not a Baal Nemonah, because in some cases it's mere hyperbole. It's just you're just we call that, I guess there's a term for it. In certain, it's called puffing. So puffing is not considered to be a lie. Let's say if someone's brought up and said, oh, but you said so and so. Yeah, I said so. So I said it. What's the big deal? In other words, that's not something that people will necessarily rely on. Again, where is that fine line? That's an important question. What's the fine line between saying something that a person would normally rely on or not? But anyway, to answer this stira, says Rav Papa, that there is a chilik. Okay, so having said that, let's take a look at Rashi. Okay, further up, Masa Rabbi Yochanan, Mishnehi Bahasoiches Apoyalim, later on, Shetziva has been, okay, that was last week. Lachsa B'tanai Achelo Yeschilu HaMalacha. Okay, we did that last week. Okay, Lo Samcha Data Al Divrei Haben. Meim Amar Kame. Okay, Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachadiesh B'dvarim Mishum Chisorin Emuna. Does Rabbi Yochanan say that in his words, there is Chisorin Emuna is that like across the board? Yochel lachzaboy, bekashalon, yochel pshita, the homoshach. He didn't give the gift. Bezin can't force him to give a gift when he says, I'm going to give a gift. It's not like you gave me consideration and I have to pay you. In that case, Bezin can enforce because it's a deal. But if I come out and I say, I want to give you a gift, and then I back out and say, I don't give you a gift, how's Bezin going to enforce that? There's no consideration. There's no reason why I'm absolutely obligated other than having said those words. Elavada al karchach mutter lachzabo ka'amav ashmin and afilu chason emuna leka. So how is that possible? Because it's a stira. So the Gemara answers, Moder Rabbi Yochanan b'matana mu'etes. Says Rashi, right? She'ein muter lachzor mishum de samcha data de mekabel adibura. That the reason why you can't retract is because the person relies on what you said. By a big matana. In other words, there is not an expectation in the normal course that if I come out of nowhere and I offer you a huge matana, you're skeptical. Maybe there's a little bit of a deher. Okay, he's a wealthy fellow. Maybe he means it. Maybe he doesn't. But you're skeptical. If you don't get it, you don't say, "Oh, I just missed a huge opportunity," because it was never there, so to speak.
So, Rabbi, let me give you an example where it may not be enforceable, but it's a matter of mishapara. So I go to someone and I say, my car broke down. I don't have a car. And your friend says, I have a car for you. I have a 65 Mustang that is, I'm not using it, sitting in my garage, and I'll give it to you, and it's fine and you'll be able to use it. Oh, thank you so much. Instead, he gives him a model car of a 1965 Mustang. So it's the guy counted on it. No, he can retract it. It's not enforceable because it's a gift. But we're talking about how a mensch is supposed to function. And this is a slippery slope because okay, I can get out of it, but I didn't really mean what I said, but somebody's relying on it. So how do you gauge that?
Right. So you're absolutely correct that we're talking about a very fine line of, I mean, if you were to take a poll, again, it's not scientific, but what does your insight tell you? That if a person makes you an offer that is very substantial, most people will probably, if they made such an offer, either not be willing to or not able to carry forward. But in the moment they were excited, and in the moment they said, oh, I'm going to help you, I'm going to give you this car that and at the end of the day, it turns out either they don't have the car or the car isn't working. But in their excitement, they wanted to sort of blurt out something that would be supportive. This is not
context, though, Rabbi. In the situation that I described, the person's desperate, so you're gonna put it in front of them and then take it away, and that's the same as somebody.
That's not exactly. You're right. It's not ideal. So if you're baiting him and baiting and switching, then okay, there is closer to the opportunity of being over something. But in the context of, I promise you, in other words, no consideration. This is not a sale. It's just one-sided. I'm doing for you, says the Gemara, that people, generally speaking, are more attuned to believing or understanding that someone will do for them or give them if it's a smaller. Now, qualify that. I am not giving you a definition exactly smaller than larger, because maybe some people do come along and they have the ability. Warren Buffett can give you a car, he can offer you a car, and that would be maybe a matana zuta for him. But but we have to use our seichel
But
here.
Rabbi, a wealthy individual,
Right. From a
says,
wealthy individual,
we're
you might
starting
have
a
a
new
different.
yeshiva, and I'm going to give $200,000 to start the new yeshiva, and then I back out of it. It's a gift. It's a one-sided gift, but it's something. It's a pledge that you're counting on, and you back out of it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Look, the emes is that if you say it, you should follow up on it, especially as now you're touching on something different. You're talking about tzedakah. Tzedakah has a different sort of context than giving you just a matana from me to you. I'm a friend.
But tzedakah to who? The person without the car may not have had any money for the car.
Right.
They were counting on you.
Right.
To be a giver. So
right.
That's not tzedakah because it's not an institution rather than an individual.
Right. So,
excuse me, Rabbi.
Michael, the car that you offered him was not the one you gave him, but you still gave him a car. So he still had the availability of a vehicle to use. You didn't have to give him
I'm
a
talking
Rolls
about
Royce.
a model 60.
Oh, a little model one.
Like a little matchbox car.
Yeah,
Okay. That's an insult.
Excuse me, can I add something to this?
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
The thing that I'm curious about is that we're talking about psychological estimations when you try and generalize to the larger group of Jewish people. Now, how does the Gemara come around and say that, well, a lot of people might take it this way? They're trying to say that they know enough about the psychology of people that they're going to come down with an answer. Whereas there's so many variables in the different ways, exactly what Michael says. And so
right.
I understand they need to have an answer because this is a practical question that can happen. So they came down on the psychological analysis of people in those days, how they would react to to a conversation like this. Now, how does that get generalized, all the way down to our time?
Well, I mean, let's put ourselves in the position of today. You're having a conversation with someone at shul or in a restaurant or someone else, and then out of the blue, someone says, Jay, Michael, I like you. I'm going to give you a car. You're sitting across the guy. Do you instantly embrace that and said, I'm getting a car? I mean, we all have a healthy degree of skepticism about things generally in life. And if someone makes you an offer, what's the old expression? Something that's too good to be true usually isn't, or along those lines. So in other words, you're going to give me a car. Now, if I was sitting across from, who is this fellow? There was someone who was giving away these huge gifts of very extravagant gifts. I forget exactly where I saw it. Someone was doing that, and it was in the news, so to speak. Okay, so you're sitting, and somehow you're with this fellow, and
Bezos's ex-wife.
Who's that?
Bezos's ex-wife.
Okay, so and all of a sudden I get this offer, and I know for a fact it's true because I've read it and I've seen it. Maybe there's more to it than just matana zuta, matana meruba in that kind of case. But we're talking about in the norm. Rav Papa wants to distinguish why Rabbi Yochanan says in one case he is trustworthy, and in one case he's not trustworthy. So he's making sort of a general rule that what Rabbi Yochanan means when he says trustworthy, it's when it's a normal thing between two people that is within the normal realm of acceptance. Then if you do it, then you're untrustworthy if you back out. But if I'm giving you something so exaggerated that it's not in the normal, now some people may. You're right, Michael. Maybe in some cases somebody will make that offer and it's genuine, and it'll be a big letdown if he pulls back. But kind of in the norm, and that we're dealing again. It's not scientific. So in the norm, if someone is approached and given something so substantial that it's not within his normal realm of understanding, says the Gemara, that doesn't make someone untrustworthy if he backs out. Now, there's a lot of nuances to that, Michael. I understand, depending on where, what, and when. But this is a generalized statement that Rabbi Yochanan makes. So he's saying, you know what? In some cases, I'm not so makbid that if he backs out, that he will be. Again, where's the very fine line in a particular case, whether it is or it isn't? So
but Rabbi, the oxymoron here is that Rabbi Yochanan is very particular. He holds people to accountable for their words.
Right.
It's not it's not a joking thing for someone to rely on it. So
right, exactly.
that he would be he would be so loose to say, in some cases it doesn't coincide with his general view on things. Someone who is who's more lenient would be, you could understand that, but he's very particular about words.
Well, so in Rob's case, Rob may not even be makbid on a small gift if someone reneges, because Rob says that just backing out of words is not necessarily make you untrustworthy. So you're right. In Rob's case, even a smaller offer, a smaller gift would not be detrimental to someone's veracity. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, where veracity is called into question if you renege, then we have to, says Rav Papa, we have to make some kind of distinction. And again, this could be a moving target, Michael, that if you went to ask a shaila, did I violate, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, did I violate my responsibility to be truthful? So.
But Rabbi, it goes back to Jay's statement, which is, when do you know? So Rav, and Rabbi Yochanan, they're great, they're great tzaddikim, they're great scholars. They understand where the line is drawn where, and they make a judgment. But for we who are supposed to follow that, we being from that time until now, I don't know that you can play around with, it's discerning. It's what Jay said.
And by the way, I'm sure there are shilas and chuvas on this very subject where someone, like you said, someone may have relied on the car situation that you posed or something else, and it said to me, I really accepted this. Is this really right? And it may require a psak on whether or not you violated. Now, again, you're not necessarily violating a Torah obligation.
The mishapara. I mean, it's a matter of your reputation.
Potentially a mishapara, right? So I think that what we have to take away from this is that according to Rabbi Yochanan, there are two standards. And the question of the moving line, what is the moving line of when you cross that standard and you're now into the sort of the detrimental, so he gives a general explanation of small versus large, and we're sort of grappling with, well, what is small, what is large, and where does someone's where does someone begin to say, oh, yes, I'm makabel this, that I'm going to get it, as opposed to, oh, sure, yeah, you're going to give me a car, you're going to give me $1,000 or whatever it is. So I think we have to sort of leave that question and generally say there is a chiluk, but it's a fine line, as you've pointed out. I mean, it's a very fine line. And the question is, where is Zuta? We know a definition. Zuta is small, Maruba is large. What does large mean? So Rashi says, Matana Maruba kama deloy some chadata, with a major matana, a person is not so mechdas, the makabel, the lekaima ledibura, because he sort of, he said, big deal, he said. So those are Rashi's words. Now, what does it actually mean? When does it become Maruba or not? So I'm not sure we're going to be able to reach a conclusion on that, but I think what we should think about is, in the larger sense, what would you consider to be a Maruba? What would I consider to be Maruba? I mean, and maybe it's location dependent or time dependent, and in jurisdictions or in places where it was more the norm to give matanas, in other words, where people were generous in giving, then you could, that line might move. You're absolutely right. That might be. Jay, go ahead.
there's something left out here. I mean, you go through all this psychological analysis and this, but you're missing the boat here that if somebody said that to me, I'm not going to sit there quietly. I'm going to ask the person, did you really mean it? I mean, there's more to the conversation, and they seem to cut the thing, right in the middle of a conversation. You would expect psychologically the receiver of this gift would say, Michael, did you really mean it? Because I'm getting excited about this thing. And you would ask so they're stopping the dialogue, which I would say psychologically, they've stopped it in the middle of a normal conversation.
So I think you hit something. If that conversation, if it goes in that direction, where there then is a follow-up discussion to determine whether the statement you made is actually emes or not, then I think we're getting to the point where we're going to hone in on it. Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi just leaves it open that a person made this magnanimous offer, and Rashi says, in and of itself, that offer does not hold water. You're going to the next step. Okay, do you mean it? Let's have a discussion. I don't think anybody, certainly Rabbi Yochanan, would not dispute that if you go down that line and that there is a clear understanding that he really does mean it, that retracting from what, quote, might be a matana meruba is a knock on his trustworthiness, because not only did he say it, but he backed it up with a commitment, with a statement. It wasn't just a one-off, I'm going to give you a car. And there was a shakla, Vitaria, you asked me, I asked you, we went back and forth, and we honed in on what it is that I actually said. Then you can rely on it, because at that point in time, it wasn't just a off-the-cuff statement that you could say, I didn't mean it, I was just joking, or whatever.
Like making up a scenario that is not likely to happen that way. I think if somebody says, I'm going to give you a car, you're going to ask them, are you serious? So they seem to be leaving off the full conversation that would likely happen.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting.
Great analysis, because it's a hypothetical.
Right.
And
it's interesting that neither Rashi nor any of the Mefarshim actually go down that route and say, what was there a discussion? What did he mean? In other words, the discussion here is just, I said it. Did you accept it? Did you not accept it? And then I retracted. Not, we had a 5-minute conversation. We went back and forth. What does it mean? What am I actually giving you? And I would certainly say that once you go down that level of detail, that retracting it, according to Rabbi Yochanan, for sure, would make him untrustworthy, because he didn't just say it, he doubled down. Not only did he say it, he doubled down, and he said even more than just an off the cuff. Off the cuff, we can understand. Yeah, he was exercise. He was hyperbolic. He didn't mean it. He was just so excited about that he wanted to blurt something out. But once you have kavana and you start thinking about it and asking and answering, it's no longer just an hyperbole. It's no longer just an exaggeration. It's actually a discussion for which you are responsible, according to Rabbi Yochanan, not according to Rav. According to Rav, you still can get away with it. Yeah.
One more part of this that may be missing. Were there Adim that heard him say it?
So clearly this subject does not bring up Adim, no, because with Adim now you're entering a sort of a different realm. I agree. So clearly this was just you and I privately talking, and I blurted something out, and then you said, I relied on it, I didn't rely, whatever it was, and then right. The Gemara is just saying that kind of. So once you get into Adim, now we're talking about something a little bit different. And again, we have to investigate what the Adam understood, because not everything that you say in Adam here, again, would necessarily be sort of the final word. But yeah, the answer is no. There's no Adam. It was just a one-on-one conversation.
But Rabbi, technically, if somebody did that in front of Adam, even if they puffed in front of Adam,
right?
I thought a gift is a one-sided transaction, you said, so you could retract it. So
correct.
What do Adam gain you except that I heard him say that, because right. They can't hold him accountable?
Exactly right. So that even in that case, you're right, that Adam, in a situation of a matana where the Bezdin has no shlita, it has no koach, it has no enforcement capability. What are they going to force you to give a gift? That's totally. But remember, we're not talking about that halacha. We're talking about whether that guy has nemonis the next time he's called on to be an aide. Can you trust him to be an aide if he said something and retracted? Not that he owes anybody any money. This has to do with his veracity to be an aide or to be in an important position. I mean, a person who's not, for instance, an aide kedushin have to be people of veracity. Can you imagine if he's disqualified for being an aide? He becomes an aide kedushin. A guy gets married with this guy as an aide, and then later on it comes out that he was apostle le'edus. Is that kedushin chal? Now we're getting into real trouble. But so this whole inyan of nemonis has some teeth to it. It is important, even if there's not going to be a monetary obligation of payment or anything, but it has to do with in the Jewish world how we present ourselves, and words do matter. Words do
Isn't that
matter.
the context of a mishapara? I mean, if somebody
Yeah,
has
they're not going to the level of
you
they're
stay
not going
away
to the
from
level.
them.
Yeah.
You're not going to. So whether it's a matter of observation here. He may not get the formal declaration you're on the list, but that word will travel even if he only says it once and somebody relied on that.
Right.
It will travel and he will not be trustworthy. I mean, your words matter, like you said.
Right. So let's make a little bit of a distinction here so that we know what we're talking about. The whole theory of mishapara really applies let's call it in a business sense, where there's monetary obligations, mekach or memker, and you sell, and then you say, no, I didn't mean to sell, or I only sold this, not that, like the different cases we have with the flax and everything else. That's when mishapara enters the picture. In a case where there isn't a sale, it's like the matana, for instance, the one-sided offer. There we're not talking mishapara. There we're talking about basically, is this person a truthful person? And if he is or he is not, is material on whether or not you look at him in the future in that light. But it doesn't rise to a mishapara, again, because of the fact that Beis Din can't enforce it. So if Beis Din can potentially enforce a situation, and now the question is it a transaction? Is it not a transaction? We have a machlokes whether or not a mishapara applies, because we don't want people to be transacting in business and willfully or just cavalierly backing out.
But you said that just take the context of tzedakah, that's a different story. In that context, it may not be a mishapara, but it has a much greater context than somebody puffing and saying, oh, I'm going to give you a car unless you relied on it. But if I'm going to give you $200,000 toward a building, that's not is that not a mishapara? It's not a mishapara, but what is it? What is it then?
It's lacking in good faith, again, because there was no transaction. In other words, when you lose money or there is a chesaron kiss, that's what we call it. When there's a chesaron kiss, that there is the possibility of losing money. That's when it rises to a different level of mishapara. You shouldn't do it because now you're causing someone literal damage, monetary damage. But in the case of a one-sided offer where so to speak, no harm, no foul. What did I expend here? Okay, so
wait a minute. So
you gave me an expectation, and now I don't have the expectation.
Wait a minute.
But that's not chesaron kiss.
If I'm going to break ground with a construction company on a new building, and I have to get pledges that total $2 million, and that $200,000 was part of that $2 million, and I took it.
But that's chesaron kiss, Michael. That's chesaron kiss. There's a monetary loss to the person whose expectation is to get it. That's a difference.
Well, so if I'm expecting
in a matana, there's no chesaron kiss. Oh yes, my feelings are hurt because I really was on a high that you're giving me $200,000 or whatever the matana was, and now I don't get it. But what am I not getting? Did I lose? In other words, it hurt my psyche. It hurt my mental acuity and my ability to be makabel that, oh, why I had such a wonderful windfall. But it wasn't a chesaron kiss. It wasn't where I'm out of pocket, where I literally lose money, where the Gemara says that you do that to somebody, then you're over, according to one man, then you're over, and you could have a mishapara. But mishapara to apply when it's simply my beneficence, I'm going to give you a matana, and it's going to be this and this, and then I said, not really, or whatever. We have to draw that line. We really do. Yes, you can say
but it's a matter of
to the
context.
person. It's
a matter of
context, right?
context.
Yeah, it's as they say, it's context, right? But the fact is that there is a chilik between chasar and kiss and just hurt feelings or feeling bad or having been deceived, and I look foolish. Oh, I was deceived. I'm naive. I really believed I'm getting that car or I'm getting that thing. That, says the Gemara, according to Rabbi Yochanan, does not qualify as a stigma on that person's amuna. He can still be believed for other things, but he hasn't, quote unquote, or in the finer sense, committed some kind of theft or committed some kind of a violation of the other person's money. And chasar and kiss, as we've learned many times in the Gemara, that the Torah is very makbid for you and for every person's monetary status and loss. In other words, the Torah is makbid that a person should not be hurt monetarily and suffer loss. We've seen that many times in the Gemara. So if that's the case, that there is this persuasion that a person should be whole and shouldn't be taken advantage of monetarily, then you could say, you know what, you do it, now we're going to punish you, or we're going to say mishapara, whatever. But as far as veracity, that's where there is a different machlokes. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you still can be dinged on your veracity, but only when there is an exchange between two people that is, and again, I tell you, it's a fine line, when there's an exchange between two people that there's an expectation that what you're telling me may really be real. But if in the norm, one would say, you know what, this would be fantastic if you give me 200,000 or a car or whatever, but do I really believe it? Well, I'll believe it, when I see it, I'll believe it. Okay, fine. As opposed to, oh, you're giving me this gift, and the gift would be something that would be normal between two friends or two people. And again, we're not here to define it and say every case may be different, and we have to examine whether something is zuta or meruba. Is it small? Is it big? But in the normal parlance, I'm giving you an example of meruba, and I'm saying that's really out there. It's a big gift. And zuta is just something that two people would normally exchange between each other. Yeah, you need a pen, I'll give you a pen. You need a screwdriver, I'll give you a screwdriver. Again, I'm picking on really small things, but I think you get the impression that it's something that two people would normally, without a reservation, help each other. Again, no monetary consideration, just two people having an exchange, as opposed to my making an offer that is so wild. Yeah, it would be great if it happened, and maybe with a millionaire who gives away matanas, that's a big thing. But it's not the norm between two people who talk to each other, that out of the blue. And again, you're saying, oh, I don't have my car, broke down, I need a car. And in your excited response, you say, no problem, I have a 55 Mustang sitting in my garage. I'm going to help you with that. And then it turns out that either the car isn't working, or you had to change the mind, or whatever. That kind of offer is, again, maybe too good to be true, and therefore not viable or to test a person's nemonis. All right. Anyway, I think, again, we could go on and on this, but I think there is a point here that we're making. Now, the Gemara wants to make a proof now that Rabbi Yochanan has a different standard when it comes to a matana zuta as opposed to an otherwise. Says the Gemara, Hochi nami mistabra. Not only is that the fact of what Rav Papa just said, but it is it makes sense that it would do that. Why? Because Rabbi Tuvia said, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Yisrael she'omra leben Levi. Now, this is an interesting circumstance. A Yisrael who said to a Levi. Now, of course, in those days, there was a chiyuv of maser, right? In an agricultural society, you had to give maser from your fruit. So Yisrael said to a Levi, Kur maser yesh lecha biyadi. I have a kur, a certain measure of a kur of maser that I have, and I have to give it to a Levi, and I'm going to give it to you. You, Levi, I'm going to give it to. You're going to get maser. Now, remember that we talked about in the previous Gemara that when a person, a Levi or Kohen, but particularly a Levi, gets maser, then having received that maser, that can alleviate trumas maser from another place that he owns. So, for instance, this Levi is getting maser from this fellow. A Levi is not allowed to eat maser without giving trumas maser to a Kohen. So all the maser he gets, in order to unlock it, that he could use it, he has to give a tenth of that to the Kohen. Okay, fine. So here's what happened. The Yisrael said, I'm going to give you maser. Ben Levi Rishoy lasses trumas masa al mokam acher. So now this Levi says, oh, he hasn't gotten it yet, by the way. I'm going to get from this Yisrael maser, I'm going to designate trumas maser from something that I have a mile away that someone else gave me. In other words, Levi doesn't own anything, right? Levi is totally dependent on the goodwill of Klal Yisrael. So he gets from this guy maser, from this guy maser. He got maser. He can't eat it because he hasn't given trumas maser. So he says, you know what? That pile of maser that I have down the road, I'm giving trumas maser from that, and I'm going to be allowed to eat this maser. Perfectly legitimate. A Levi can do that. So says the Gemara here, he can do it. Now this is going to be the proof to Rabbi Yochanan. If you will say lo motzah mahadabe, that is this considered zuta or meruba? If you're going to say that the Yisrael who's giving this maser cannot renege, he can't renege on his gift of maser to this Levi. Now I understand why the Levi can give trumas maser from something else, because even though he didn't yet get it from the Yisrael, but the Yisrael can't retract. It's a zuta, it's a small gift, right? And if he can't retract, that means he has it, even though it's not in his rishus. Now the Levi can give trumas maser from another pile. Makes perfect sense. Elo, but if you're going to tell me that the Yisrael can retract, oh, I didn't mean it, I'm not going to give you that. What's going to happen is, the ramification of that, Amai Rishoi, why is it permitted for the Levi to give Truma Maser from something else and then say, okay, this is going to be permitted? So then the Levi will wind up being over a lav because he's going to eat tevel. Because remember, the Levi can't have this until he gives trumas maser from another place. But he's going to rely on the fact that this Yisrael is giving him this maser, so that this maser will be sort of the safety valve for him to be able to give trumas maser. But if the guy's allowed to retract, then the whole house of cards falls out. And if the whole thing falls apart, then it's going to turn out that he's going to eat tevel.
The Levi has to give trumas maser from every separate truma, I guess truma that comes into him.
In other words, from the amalgamation
Maser.
of all the maser that he gets, he has to give 1/10, right? So if he gets a small portion from this Yisrael, and a small portion from this Yisrael, and a small portion from this Yisrael, then let's say the totality of it is X, and he has to give 10% of X. Now, he may get other gifts later, in which case he has to give more Trumas Maser. But at least from what's in front of him, he has to give 1/10 of everything he has in front of him.
But if he has more than enough, and this other gift comes in and gets retracted, nothing is lost. Why shouldn't the person be allowed to retract? Because he knows the Levi has more than enough already to give 10%.
Right, but we don't know what he's going to get in the future, so we only know what he has in front of him today. If what he has in front of him today is let's say 3 gifts from different people, and now from that he has to give Trumas Maser, so he's relying on the fact that this fellow is going to give him the Maser, so he can give Trumas Maser. Okay, yeah.
So before this conversation, why is this person that we're questioning about what he can and can't do, why does he kick it into now he has to give Trumas Maser? He had to give Trumas Maser no matter what quantity came in from any other Yisrael. I don't know what this situation.
I'm wondering, is the situation, I'm very confused about this. I'm good at that. It's situated, he gets 10 bushels from Yisrael A, 10 bushels from Yisrael B, and Yisrael C says, I'm going to give you 10 bushels. So as soon as he gets the A, he takes out 3 bushels and says, this is going to be for these 3 gifts, which he doesn't even have everything yet. Now you see Yisrael C changes his mind and doesn't give it to him. He's given 3 bushels to Truma, that's fine. And now Yisrael D gives him 10 bushels. Is the idea then that first part that he did doesn't count for this new stuff because it wasn't what it was originally going to be for? Is that the issue?
Well, yes, that's part of it. In other words, if you get something later that isn't part of the first group, yes, then now you have to start.
Even though he's given enough that nominally it would have been okay, but it's for different stuff.
Right. So the Claire here is that if the person who is going to commit to this Maser backs out and doesn't give him the Maser, right, and so he doesn't have it, then the question is, how can you declare? How can he say I'm giving Trumas Maser for something he doesn't have?
But he doesn't need it. He can give Trumas Maser from the first couple. The 20 bushels, the way Menashe said it. The question that's on the table here is the quantity have to be achieved first before you give, Trumas Maser, or
does a promise of receiving it count?
So this is the question, whether the promise counts if you can renege or not. If you can't renege, then the promise does count. But if you can renege, then how can you rely on that promise to say that this should be part of the Trumas Maser he's giving? He's giving it on something that isn't there.
Is he committing to something that's not there?
That's correct. He's committing to something that isn't there, and therefore he'll wind up eating tevel.
Why should he do that?
Maybe it's a convenience thing. Maybe there aren't very many Kohanim in town, and so if he gives the 3 bushels now to the Kohen who stops by, he's like, okay, now tonight when this other guy hopefully gives me this stuff, I'll be all set, and I won't have to go hunting for the Kohen to use the stuff.
But if the Levi is required to give Trumas Maser whenever anything comes into his possession.
No. But here's, I think, the missing ingredient. The missing ingredient is that what he's designating Trumas Maser is the food stuff that he's getting from this Yisrael who's now reneging. So the Trumas Maser, the Trumas Maser that he was relying.
So in my example, he's not taking it out of A, he's planning on taking it out of C, and C never shows up.
Correct. So he's going to eat the other food, and that's tevel, because he's not giving Trumas Maser from that which the fellow reneged. Right? In other words, the person who reneged on what would have been his Trumas Maser. And by not having that Trumas Maser and eating the other Maser, he's eating tevel because the other fellow didn't give him that. In other words, there's a certain priority here. You have to give the Trumas Maser before you can eat the other Maser. So if the person is making a dedication, I'm going to give you this Maser. Oh, he says, oh, that's terrific. Now I can eat from the Maser that I have in the other pile because this is Trumas Maser. And in the normal course, that's okay. But now the person reneged on what would have been the Trumas Maser. And this guy already ate the other food, and that's tevel because it was not properly tithed.
The Levi learned a lesson here that when he gets in from other people first, he should give Trumas Meiser from the stuff that came in. Then he can eat that stuff right away. If he gave,
but yeah, you're right, but he didn't do that. You're right, Jay, but he didn't do that. He should have right away given the Trumas Maser, but he didn't.
Should have done.
I'm sorry.
Because just in case somebody's going to come in and promise him something,
right?
Rely on that.
And unfortunately, this Levi did. This Levi was in the middle. He's a popular Levi, and he knows a lot of people are going to give him. So he's waiting to see what the totality of all the gifts that he's getting on Maser. And this fellow came along, and he's standing in front of him and says, I'm dedicating this amount to you. And he says, perfect. Now I want to make a Suda. I want to use it, whatever. Now I can use the other food because I know this is my Trumas Maser, and therefore I can go eat the other. Once the guy pulls away and reneges, then Trumas Maser was not given, and he was eating tevel.
So a Levi's always risking that something may come in as a gift or whatever. Or
so this is the point the Gemara is making. So it's a raya that since he can do that he's relying on because it's a small gift. This is considered a matana zuta, not a maruba. All right, a tithing, that's not considered, let's say, a big gift. So if it was a small gift and he's relying on it, then he's proper in what he's doing. But if you're going to say that he can't rely on it, then why even initially did he say, I'm going to eat that maser? He should have waited literally until he got it in his hand. Here he's not waiting because he was relying on the fact that it was a matana zuta. Says the Gemara, therefore we want to bring a raya to Rabbi Yochanan that a matana zuta you can rely on because the person isn't going to renege. That's in fact exactly what the Gemara wants to prove, is that you can rely on it because a person has no manas, he has veracity, and he won't renege.
So, Rabbi, is it different here because it's a mitzvah that they're performing? Because he could change his mind, designate another Levi. So once he makes that designation, halachically, it affixes him to have to make that donation to
yes,
Levi
that's exactly what
designates.
Right, that's exactly what we're relying on. That it was a mitzvah, and therefore, if he's doing a mitzvah, why would he renege on a mitzvah? I mean, you give tzedakah, and then you say, I want to take my money back because I don't want to give tzedakah. If a person makes the commitment, it's a mitzvah. Of course,
so that's the distinction here from the other cases, is that it's in pursuit of a mitzvah, and people are relying on that. And so it has ramifications beyond the actual gift itself. Therefore, you have to adhere to that, and you can rely on that and make sure that it's that
right. But let me even refine it a little bit further. That Yisrael can't use that food. That food is maser. The only thing within his control is who gets it, which Levi gets it.
Right, I understand.
I give it to you as a Levi, or I give it to someone else as a Levi. But so in other words, I'm already obligated to give that mitzvah. That's a done deal.
I understand that, but here he's fixing that this is the Levi I'm giving it to because the Levi is relying on that gift, and therefore he cannot change that once he designates.
Correct.
I have one other question. Can somebody overgive from the early
you can give more than maser, by the way. You can give more.
I'm saying, and can you give an extra amount from the early gifts to approximate what else you may get in and still count it, even though you're not giving anything from the later gifts?
Yeah,
right. That was my example.
Yeah, that's a little complicated because normally, remember, the Levi is living hand to mouth. The Levi is not a wealthy guy. He's relying on what the Israelim are giving him. In the normal course, he gets his maser, and he's obligated to give trumas maser, but it's not the norm that he would give more, as you say, to fulfill for a later gift, because
But let's take a look this
he
way.
doesn't have from what he doesn't have.
He has great veracity. I want to make sure that I don't forget, that I don't use up. So I'm going to give the early part. I know that from historical experience, that I'm going to get some more, but I want to make sure that I fulfill my requirement right away.
Again, I don't know that we have enough body of evidence to suggest that the Levi would do that. If he did it, then maybe it would accommodate a later gift. But again, the norm is that the Levi
Did you go?
gives from what's in front of him. So if he has 100 kur that he got in maser, and he has to give trumas maser, then he gives 10. Not 12, 15 to accommodate a future gift. That's not typically the way the Levium operate. If he did it, kol hakavod lo, and maybe he beat, he sort of got out ahead of it. But that's not typically the way Trumas Maser is given. Trumas Maser is given from what's in front of you, and
but it's not. So I hear you.
I mean, it's not an absolute, Michael. Yes, the answer is it's not an absolute.
So it doesn't. So it's not from the same. It's not from the new crop that he receives, but that's okay if he fulfills.
Something. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure that that's an accurate answer, because if he decides to give to the Kohen Trumas Maser of more than a tenth, that's on him. If he then later gets other maser, now that I think of it, I do not believe that the previous gift, which was overstated because he gave more than Trumas Maser, that applies to the future. I think every new batch requires Trumas Maser of a tenth. And you can't rely on, I gave 15%, now I don't have to give a full 10%. Because what you gave out of the goodness of your heart to the Kayin, fine, you get, all right, maybe you get schar, maybe you don't, whatever. But to say that amount applies to a future gift, I don't.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's the sanctity of the gift itself need to be retained, so that he gives from each batch that he gets.
Each batch, correct.
You're right.
That is a correct statement. So now the Gemara. Okay, so the Chayra, this is a good raya, because if we're allowing him to do it, that's a raya that a matona zuta is not. He's not retracting, because if he was retracting, then how can the Gemara say that the Levi can rely, right? So the Chayra right now, that's a good raya on who? On Rabbi Yochanan, that the Matana Zuta works. Says the Gemara, and we'll finish with this. Says the Gemara, let's see where we are. Why is it permissible? He'll answers the Gemara, Hocha b'mayaskina, no raya from that case to Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Hocha b'mayaskina gon shenotlu mimenu. And listen to this, where the Levi took it from where the Levi took the maser that was given to him, b'chazav v'hifkido etzlo, and then he said to the Yisrael, you know what? Why don't you hold it on? Hold it for me. I'm taking it, but hold it for me. So what's pshat? So, in other words, it's not a raya. It's not a raya that he's committed to that, because he's actually taking it. It isn't a question of he didn't get it, and therefore it's a raya that a matana zuta works. He actually did take it. So you can't bring a raya to Rabbi Yochanan that if a person gets a commitment for a matana zuta, that it's as if he got it, because here he took it. He actually took it, but he said, you know what? Do me a favor and be and hold it on to me. Hold it for me. So therefore, it's no raya. You can't bring a raya from that for Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so that slugs up the raya. Okay, so says the Gemara, we'll finish. If you're telling me that our circumstance is that he gave it to him, and he gave it back to him to hold, let's say, as a mashkin for whatever reason, the seifa of that brisa says as follows, right? What does it say there? Nosta leben Levi acher. What happens? Here's the circumstance. Michael, I'm a Yisrael. I'm giving it to you as a Levi, and then you say, you know what? To me, you say, do me a favor, hold it for me. I'm holding it, and then all of a sudden I say, you know what? Menashe's a Levi. I'm going to give it to him. So you gave it back to me. I'm holding the Maser, and I give it to Menashe, and Menashe doesn't know that this is being recycled.
You give it to David.
Maser. So now Menashe has it. You don't have it anymore. It's not yours, Michael. It's Menashe's.
Pretty upset.
So what happens? So what does the Gemara say? Ein lo olav elo tarumos. The only thing you, Michael, have on me is a complaint. You can't file in Bezdin. You have a complaint against me that I didn't do right by you, right? Ve'isal kedatach. Now, if you're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan is speaking konshonotl mimenu, where you took it from me and gave it back to me as a mashkin because of hifkida, and you give it back to me, amai ein loch ela tarumas. Why is there only tarumas? Right? It should be more kiven the mishkachas mamona osale gabe. It should be much more. It should be an actual lawsuit, because once you gave it to me, it's mine. I gave it to you, hold as a mashkin. You stole it from me now. Isn't he become
a shomer at that point? Isn't he?
No. But you gave me. I gave you, Michael. It's
right,
yours.
And then I gave it to you to hold and watch for me.
And I converted it. I owe it to you. I took away your produce. Why does the Gemara say it's only tarumas?
I agree.
There should be a full lawsuit.
I agree.
Therefore, the Gemara has to conclude, and alav shmamina. Therefore, the Gemara has to conclude, but the low, not low. You can't have a circumstance where he took it and gave it back to him as a mashkin. Remember, the Gemara wanted to refute and say it's no raya to Rabbi Yochanan because the fellow actually, because the Levi took it and gave it back to him. So it's no raya, But you can't be speaking about a case where he actually took it, because if he took it, then there should be a lawsuit if he converts it, if the Yisrael then converts it to somebody else. And the Gemara says, no, it's only tarumas. It's only a complaint, not a lawsuit. Therefore, it's a raya that this brisa cannot be speaking about a situation where he actually took it, meaning the Levi, and gave it back to him. So we're back to our first case that he owes it to him. He hasn't given it to him yet, but since he made the pledge, and it's a matana zuta, it's a raya to Rabbi Yochanan. Remember, this whole discussion is we want to give a proof to Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yochanan is right. And we said the proof is because if the brisa says that he's allowed to give trumas maser, but there's a possibility that the guy will renege. And says the Gemara, he won't renege because it's a matana zuta. Says the Gemara, you can't bring a raya from that case. In that case, the Levi actually took it. It's in his rishus, and then he gave it to the Yisrael back as a hold, a pekadon. In which case, so now there's no more raya about matana zuta because it isn't a matana zuta case. It's a case where he actually owns it. Says the Gemara, if you're telling me it's a case, then the brisa of that same, the seifa of that same brisa, if you're telling me that he actually gave it to him and it's his now, then why does the Gemara say in the case where he flip-flopped and gave it to a second Levi that it's no big deal, it's just a complaint? It's more than a complaint, it's an actual theft. Says the Gemara, therefore we can't be talking about a case where he actually took it, because then the whole thing would fall apart. So what are we talking about? We're talking about where he made a pledge. Well, if he made a pledge, then it's a raya to Rabbi Yochanan that by making a pledge of a matana zuta, you can the Levi can rely on it. He doesn't have to worry, and therefore it's a raya. This is all about whether or not Rabbi Yochanan is right or not. And when we're saying from the Brisa, it's right, because if you're going to be talking about a case where he actually took it and it isn't a pledge anymore, it's an actuality, then the seifa of that Brisa falls apart, because then there should be a full-blown lawsuit if I double back and give it to another Levi. So you see how the Gemara it's fascinating. Again, the Gemara wants to bring a raya and brings a raya from another brisa, and that brisa has to be talking about a different circumstance than what we're talking about. So at the end of the day, the case of the brisa, fine, okay. If you convert and give it to the second Levi, you're definitely liable, no question. But our Gemara is talking about where he only made the commitment, and since a commitment of a zuta is ironclad, we're saying it's established, therefore he's allowed to eat trumas masa, and we're not worried about tevel. Remember, if we have a havamina, if we have a doubt that something bad is going to happen here and he's going to eat tevel, we will warn him, don't do it, because you're liable to wind up eating tevel, because you're not going to get the matana. But since we're so sure that in Rabbi Yochanan's view, once you make a matana zuta, a person won't renege because of trustworthiness, then we automatically say, you know what? He didn't get it yet, but he's going to get it. Let him let him be considerate trumas maser and eat from the other food and not worry about tevel, because there won't be a renege. There won't be a callback. All right, so let's take a look at Rashi. We'll end with this. So Rashi says,
there's a real discussion here of whether which set of words matter or don't matter.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's exactly the whole point of this Gemara, is whether words matter. But listen to why, because there's a pasuk in the Navi. This is very interesting. Take a look at the Rashi. Rashi says over here, Masa yesh lebnei Levi, kol Levi kara ben Levi. Every Levi is called a ben Levi. Kura Masa yesh Levi biyadi she'asati mifrosi ve'itnenuloch. I'll give you from this Masa. Trumas Masa she'halevi mefarish Masa lekoyen Masa min Masa. Now look at this Rashi. Mishum hachi rishoy. Why is it permitted? Sheyesh lo lismoch, because you can rely on Masha Kosov. The Navi in Tzofania says about all of us. Everyone, She'eris Yisrael lo yasa avlov lo yadabru kozov, that the Klal Yisrael, She'eris Yisrael, will not commit sin and will not speak falsely. In other words, we all have a cheskes kashrus that we will do the right thing, right? And then I won't recant on what I said. We have a cheskes kashrus that we won't do that. And this is a small matana, because the Yisrael doesn't have any benefit from this masa. He can't eat it. It's only his goodwill. Let's say I want to earn goodwill by a certain Levi, so I give it to that Levi. I can't eat it. It's already masa. I can't eat it. It's a question of who gets it, right? So in other words, every Jew has a cheskes kashrus that he will not do. I mean, if you violate the cheskes kashrus, we can't do anything. But you go in with a certain chazaka that you will tell the truth. So therefore, we believe him, right? So ein lo olav, ein lo leben Levi rishon al Yisrael zeh. He doesn't have any taina. Ela tarumis. All he can do is complain. Sheheftichu, right? B'tachlis nichzava, because you promised it to me, right? If you promise it to me, then I should get it. But there's no actual lawsuit. When is there a lawsuit? When I actually took it, it's mine, and you're holding it for me as a mashkin, as a pekadon or something, then there's a lawsuit. But that's not the case here. So therefore, we go back and say it's a raya to Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan says that by matana zuta, the Levi can rely that there will not be a reneging of the commitment, and therefore there's no concern of tevel, because when he gives the maser, he says this is going to be the trumas maser. He's now allowed to eat the other food. Remember, this food he doesn't yet have because Yisrael didn't give it to him yet, but he has other food that he can eat, which he wants to make a suda. I have all this maser that I have from the other fellow who gave it to me. I'm going to eat that and rely on this maser to be the trumas maser. Says the Gemara, it's okay, and therefore it's a raya to Rabbi Yochanan. Again, it's fascinating how the Gemara comes to that raya, but we do have a proof to Rabbi Yochanan from what Rav Papa said, that matana zuta you do accept, and a matana maruba, Rabbi Yochanan will admit that there is no fallout, because it's a maruba, it's an exaggeration, it's just puffing, it's just saying something that no one relies on. Therefore, there is no backlash, so to speak, on him, that he will not be a man of veracity, because he didn't really say anything that should impugn his good name. All right, so that's the end of this sugya, and Mitzvah Shem we'll pick it up next week. But again, you see how the Gemara with the Shakla V'Tara goes back and forth. And again, all these questions, Michael and Jay, everyone, the Gemara does not delve into the actual finer points of what is a maruba. A maruba is what you'll know it when you see it, so to speak, right? You'll know it when it comes about. How much of a maruba? What does it mean? Okay, I mean that you know what, that's if you really had a shaila and it was of great concern, then you have to go to a paisik and you have to say, yeah, we evaluate this as a maruba, that this really is a maruba. But in the normal course, you and I can all understand what a maruba is. We know what we know it when we hear it, so to speak. So all right. So